Welcome to the Elokus channel. This is class number 10 in the discourse Chukas 5672, which is the seventh discourse in the great book B'Shosh Ekdimu 5672. This is class 10, and this is class maybe 5 in chapter 27, I think. I'm not sure. I think it's class number 5. Okay, in chapter 27, which is going to be the last class in chapter 27. Then we'll begin chapter 28. With that, we conclude the seventh discourse, and we'll go on and Bezrat Hashem begin the eighth discourse, which is exciting as we're making headway over here. Okay, so what we're left with in this chapter, in chapter 27, all we are left with is a one parenthesis that we didn't learn. That's in the book B'Shosh Ekdimu, the blue book that I'm learning, the one that has the whole entire hemshech, the whole continuation of discourses, all in 3 books. So that one, this is an Amud Aleph of Daf Mem Gimel, page 43. Amud Aleph, we already are have concluded the chapter as mentioned. So let's do you know what? Let's learn the kitzer in order to understand the what's it called again, the parentheses that we missed, that I skipped earlier, just to refresh our memories. Let's do the kitzer, which is the short summary that he does at the end of the chapter, which I don't think we learned yet, and then we will come back and just fine point this last point, kitzer. So this is again a summary on the entire chapter 27. He's bringing that this is all the dugma. This is all compared to what we have above. When he says that is because he was talking about in the human experience when a teacher when your teacher is teaching. When a teacher is teaching, first he's got the entire idea in the mind of the teacher, and then he has to break it into many classes, many lessons, and in each lesson there's a little part of the idea. And we learned that I'm sorry, that's an earlier thing. And this that he's comparing Vadugma is another idea. It's the idea that we learned that there is a very powerful power in the soul that brings about the combination of words, the choice of words, the koach hametzaref, the power that combines words together, and that a person uses particular words to convey ideas. This is a very, very original power of the soul, the power of chachma, which is much higher than the power of bina, which is already the understanding, the idea itself. And this is from beyond the idea, or even traced it earlier all the way up to the nefesh itself, the koach hametzaref of the osios. But that obviously goes away, he says, when you disassemble the words, when you disassemble the sentences, and definitely when you disassemble the letters, you lose that gilui hanefesh, that revelation of the soul, of this very lofty power of the soul that is able to combine words and letters. So this is all going to be an example for the two tzimtzumim that there is in the Or Ein Sof. One in the Or Ein Sof, when the Or Ein Sof is we know there's a Tzimtzum Harishon, the first symptom, and it's interesting. The first Tzimtzum Harishon, as he's explaining now, contains within itself 2 stages. First stage is to remove the Or Ein Sof obligable, stage A of the Or Ein Sof, or what we call level A of Or Ein Sof, and then there's level B of Or Ein Sof. The Esa Spheres Agnuza is the 10 hidden spheres. That's level B in the Or Ein Sof itself. And there's 2 stages of that, of the way that Tzimtzum works. First, there has to be a complete removal of the Or Ein Sof itself, of the level called Spheres Ein Kates. And that would be similar in the analogy to this high power of the soul that is direct, that is much higher than the concept that is in the lesson, but it's what's directing from a distance, the force that combines the limitlessness of the soul that has the ability to combine words and sentences, that chooses the words from a beyond conscious mindfulness, where a person is consciously deciding which words they're going to use, it kind of happens on its own because it's coming from such a deep place in the soul. That energy has to be removed completely. And then there is another thing. And there is the idea, the richness of the idea that is actually contained in the words. When you disassemble, which means you allow each sphera, each attribute to come out individually, then you lose the collective idea that's in the entire paragraph or in the entire sentence, or as we learned earlier. Okay, these are the two tzimtzumim. So he says, let's see over here. Let's do that above. The koydem tzimtzum, before there was the tzimtzum, before the contraction, or orin sof meir begilui. The orin sof was shining in a very revealed way. Allah esa spheres agnuzais. The 10 hidden spheros, which they're, as we learned earlier, the source of the mamala kalalman, of the indwelling light. It's already the light that is it's what we refer to as Orin Sof B, the way where it's already intending an audience, where it's already thinking of that there should be a recipient of it. Although it's still it's still Orin Sof, right? It's still infinite light, but it's infinite light narrowing itself down to 10 potentials. Now, inside or together or hovering and surrounding and encompassing this secondary element of the Orin Sof is the first in Kates beyond this cordled off segment of 10 potential spheres, where the energy is still purely, utterly with infinite and endless potential of attributes. So as he says, in a revealed way, Allah esa spheres agnuzais onto the 10 hidden spheres, and now you have to the tzimtzum's effect is to step away from this. Number one is to take away stage 1 of the Orin Sof, to remove that completely, and that would be similar to removing this koach Mitzaref, right? Like we said earlier, the power that combines the words. And then the second point is V'sheyatzila sfira achas prati. Now, once you separate the general potential and power of Ein Sof, that's removed, and you're left segregated the Ein Sof with a power of 10 spheros, which is tremendous diminishment. But still, the fact that all 10 are together as one unit. And at that point, you don't see the individuality of one of each sphere of each attribute. It's all included in one huge infinite concept, right? Then the next thing is to deliver each sphere individually. That's the second element in the tzimtzum. As he says, then it has to come out each one individually. And he explains, because the root of the lights is something of the Orin Sof. What do we mean like that? By this, he means even the Esa Spheres Agnuzais, even the 10 hidden spherois, which are in a sense already a source for the or, for the light that's going to go into vessels, that is going to go into kalim. It too is still me'ain, the Orin Sof. It's still a tail end of the Orin Sof. Now, this is the subject we're going to learn about more today in today's parentheses. So let's not get carried away too much over here. But remember, it's a continuum. It's all a continuum of the Orin Sof. Remember, we learned in the earlier classes that he called it the Bebchenas HaTachtona. The lowest level of the Orin Sof is the Esa Spheres Agnuzais, the tail end of the Orin Sof. In general, he said that even or itself, even the Orin Sof that is Spheres Ein Kates, the Spheres without an end, even that he referred to as already Tacht, the lower level. Why? Because when you're dealing with light is already Ziv. A Ziv, Va'ara Ba'alma, it's only a ray, and ray is considered Tachtaina, meaning the lower level. But within that itself, the light in where he's expressing his light just for himself without considering a recipient, that is still higher. Then from there, the idea that there is a tzimtzum in the Orin Sof, which is narrowing the potential only for 10 spheres, that is what he called, remember, the malchus of the Ein Sof. So, what he says, in a sharshay oiros, But the root of the oiros, of the lights, they're still similar to the Orein Sof. That's why we're calling it, it's the B'china Tachtoina, it's the lowest level of the Orein Sof. And this is the idea of Min HaKanaf. This is similar to this last week's parsha. We learned Parsha Shalach. We learned about tzitzis, where tzitzis are the fringes. Remember, we learned that the fringes, which are at the corners of the garment, they have to be of the same type of the garment, which this idea represents this very concept. The fringes, the strings that are hanging, that are hanging, they're a narrow light. That would be an example of in its most original state. It's referring to the farthest extension of the Orein Sof, that it's coming down already to become a root of 10 particular spheres. That's why it's narrow, small little strings. But even though the Orein Sof is already kind of self-constraining itself to become a source for 10 spheres, that itself is still Orein Sof. So it's me'ein hakanaf. It has to be the same material from the spheres in Kates. Not exactly that. It's min kanaf. It's not. Remember, we learned it's not the talus itself becoming strings. These strings are attached to it. So remember, we differentiated that the second stage, the second generation of Orein Sof, is not just leftovers of the Orein Sof, but it was initially intended within the Orein Sof, that the Orein Sof. Remember, we gave the example that Yaakov is not just leftovers from Yitzchak, but that when Avram has Yitzchak, within that is also a intention for Yaakov. So this is the point of it. The Or Pnimi is not exactly the Or Makiv, just narrowed down. It's not the Or Pnimi from the very get-go is meant to be an Or Pnimi, but it's still emanating through and via the Orein Sof, and it is me'ain. It is similar to the Orein Sof. That will be further explained today soon. And he says, this is the last level of the light. Because the idea of this hiskalalus, of these 10 spheres, when we say that they're still, that the Esa spheres agnuzes are still embedded in the Orein Sof, husha Orein Sof habli gevul. It's that the Orein Sof that is infinite, shir ba'atzmai, is estimating within himself leheir b'bchenas gevul, to illuminate in a gevul. That's why it's still Ein Sof, because it's an estimation taking place in Orein Sof. It's not yet gevul. It's the intention to shine in a gevul. V'hashara zu b'chenas malchus, and this hashara, this estimation, is the malchus. V'hayahakol kol ba'Orein Sof. But at this point, all of this is still included in the Orein Sof, and for this reason, he's going to continue explaining. We needed the two tzimtzumim and the two tzimtzumim to help first establish these 10 spheres independently, to become more marked off, meaning more separated, more defined, and then further to differentiate each potential as an individual line. The 10 have to become specified. Okay. Now this idea about the tzitzis being min kanaf, this is the subject matter of the idea of the skalalus and the idea of the connection of how the Esa spheres agnuzais are a continuum of the Orein Sof and not something else. He's going to contrast that with seemingly another idea of an element that is embedded in the Orein Sof, meaning of something, if you can say, there's something that is included in the Orein Sof, and yet is very different. In other words, he's going to make a contrast over here between two ideas where, in a sense, if we're examining, all we see is Orein Sof, and we say that in the Orein Sof, all there is Orein Sof. Yet there is Esa spheres agnuzais. There's the 10 hidden spheres. But then there is something else in the Orein Sof. We once spoke that the origins of the Kalim, which is the Koach HaGvul, the power of Gvul, which is the power of limitation, which is the power of the Reshimu, which later becomes only noticeable after Hashem removes the Orein Sof. That's when the Reshimu, these little traces become noticeable, become now pronounced. And this Rishimu we learned is the root. It's the beginning of the beginning of the beginning of the beginning of the Kalim. And it's really a level, it's the oisios, it's the letters that is the Orin Sof. So we discussed this earlier, and I'm just going to give you an overview before we get into the details of the understanding of this. He's going to make a very important and clear distinction between how the Esespheres Hagnuzais are one with the Orin Sof, and how the Oisias Arishimu, these letters of the Rishimu, how they too are one with the Orin Sof. And I know, again, this might sound like just a whole bunch of, but bear with me a few minutes. So we're gonna clarify this, and he's gonna differentiate, and he's going to explain that the Esespheres Agnuzais are much more one with the Orin Sof. Their oneness with the Orin Sof is so much deeper than the oneness with the Orin Sof of the osios, these hidden letters, which is the root of the koach hagvul, which is later becomes expressed through the osios harishimu once the tzimtzum happens. But before the tzimtzum happens, the shirish hagvul, the root of these letters, are all lost in the Orin Sof. There is a major difference between the Esespheres Hagnuzais and the osios. So what do we mean by that? So I have to take you back. I mean, for those who are probably keeping all that we learned in the forefront of your brain, then maybe this might sound repetitive. But to those who might have forgotten quite a lot of what we learned, I need to refresh your memories. And my memory and all of us, let's go back a little bit. If you remember, a while ago, we discussed the argument between the Ramak and the Ari. If the Or, this is like such a fundamental idea, the whole concept of Esespheres Agnuzais is what the Rebbe Rashab, the author, is trying to show us, is that there is a concept called Or Pnimi, and that Or Pnimi has its own root in the Or Ein Sof. In the Or Ein Sof itself is already, there is the concept of Or Pnimi, and the Or Pnimi is not utterly pashut. That's the whole idea versus the Or Makif. The Or Makif, which means the Or Ein Sof itself, level A, Spheres Ein Kates, over there is pure pshitus, simple with utter simplicity. The Or Pnimi, which is the Esespheres Agnuzais, although we're not talking about Kalim, this is the idea. We're not talking about vessels yet. We're talking about pure light. These lights are not utterly pashut, and that's where the Arizal is of a difference of opinion than the Ramak, because the Ramak learned that Oiros, the lights, are utterly pashut. Or Pnimi, or Makif doesn't make a difference. Lights are always pashut. There is no design to the lights at all. The lights are pure energy, and the entire element of tziyur, of limitations, definitions, is only Kalim. Therefore, that forced the Ramak to say that the concept of Esespheres Agnuzais, that the hidden spheres that are hidden, that's actually the Kalim. You can't say as what if in the Oirais there's no 10 Oirais, it's really only one light. So you can't say there's 10 spheres Hagnuzais and say that they are lights, because the lights there's no difference between the light of Chesed and the light of Gevura. It's all just one simple light. It's according to the Ramah. When will it be different? When the light will shine into a red glass, it will be red light, and it will come through a green glass, it will be green light. But the lights themselves have no difference. And therefore, since there is a concept called Esespheres Agnuzais, it must be, we're talking about Kalim, vessels. However, this was the whole theme over here in so many discourses. We were bringing out this idea that no, the Rebbe Rashab is following the opinion of the Arizal, and he's developing it and explaining it. That the Arizal says that even the lights, even in their if it's Or Pnimi, which means if Hashem is intending it to go to an audience, to go to a recipient, that light has already the seeds on the most subtle of subtle, and we can't even begin to emphasize how undefined we're talking, but we can't say utterly undefined, because the lights have already the potential of being a particular type of a light. That's the whole concept of Chiddush that we're learning over here. The Oiros are meant to be Or Pnimi. If this is the case, yet we are saying over here that even though the light, which what we called, just to help identify, Or Ein Sof B, the second stage of Or Ein Sof, where the light is already potentializing itself to 10 and not more than 10, as opposed to the earlier stage when it's still undefined and it has potential still for utter infinity. So the lights are kind of like already specifying themselves to 10 spheroids. They're becoming the seeds, if we can say, for 10 spheroids. Yet we're saying that when it's Esa spheres agnuzos, it's still completely one with the Or Ein Sof. It's one with the Or Ein Sof. And what's the whole idea of the tzitzis? For that, he brings the mashal, the example of the tzitzis. That the tzitzis, the fringes, have to be the same type as the talis, the same material as the actual garment. The garment represents the infinite light. The fringes represent the Or Pnimi, which the origins of the Or Pnimi is the Or HaKav, the light of the Kav, and the origins of the Kav is the Esa Spheres Agnuzos. So we're dealing over here with already, I refer to it in tzitzis, it's the Lamed Beis Nesivos Chachma. How many tzitzis do we have? We have 8 strands. Together is 32 on the 4. 4 times 8 is 32, which are the 32 beginnings of Chachma, which Chachma is already the Or Pnimi, the internal light. Yet, it has to be the same type as the Kanaf. Why? Because it's perfectly unified with the light. So, what do we have over here? We have something, but it's not something. It's in a sense a potential, but this potential is unified with the pre-potential completely. Now, put a pause on this a moment. Let's now examine according to the Arizal. If we say that this is true about the Oiros, that the Oiros have already a very, very hidden, subtle intention to be something in particular, how do we differentiate this from the source of the Kalim? The Kalim, what are the Kalim? The vessels. Vessels are also rooted, when you trace the vessels. So where did we say? Remember we learned a whole long discussion how the difference between how the light stems. Light is through a process of continuum. Light is in a state of dveikus, in a state of continuum. Vessels, we learned, are created through a state of disconnect, a state of not connecting the source to its. We had a whole thing about it, and we learned how the vessels come about, how initially through a clash where two energies collide with each other, and the collision creates the beginning of the osios, the letters. Because we emphasize so much that letters are also originating in very, very high. So what is the origins of letters in the Or Ein Sof? So we identify the letters for the first time. When the Or Ein Sof disappears, there's a trace left over. And it's explained, what's the trace? These are the hidden letters that till now you didn't notice, but now they become noticed. And what are these hidden letters? It's the Koach HaGvul that's in the Or Ein Sof. The Or Ein Sof we brought from the Avodas HaKodesh, from the great book of Rabbi ben Gabbai. I'm all refreshing your memory for stuff that we learned for quite a while ago. Ideas that we learned quite a while ago. Where we learned that because God is perfect, he has to have the ability to be infinite. And he also has the ability to limit himself. But in the Or Ein Sof, it's totally one. The Or Ein Sof contains within himself the ability to also be magbal himself, also limit himself. What's the first gvul? That's what the Avodas HaKodesh says. What's the first gvul? The first gvul that we can identify and we can see are the kelim of Atzilus. That's what he says. However, if you trace these kelim a little bit higher, you can find the osios higher, the letters higher, all the way to the first time they're noticed is when the Or Ein Sof is hidden in Tzimtzum Rishon. That's when suddenly they're born. these kalim are born. These oisios are born. And these are letters. What are letters? Letters is not, when you're saying an idea, when I'm teaching a concept or anybody's teaching a concept, what's happening? There is an idea, and there's the words that are containing the idea. The words and the energy are two different things. The words and the emotion, the words and the concept are two different things. The words are kalim, are vessels. So the same is all the way up. So, hold it. But before the tzimtzum arisha, where the vessels are born by the tzimtzum creates them? No. The tzimtzum allows them to be noticed. Where are these potential letters before? They're in the Or Ein Sof. But when they're in their Or Ein Sof, they're swallowed in the Or Ein Sof completely. And they're not even noticed, but they're there. It's the concept that we learned many times. We say, HaNefesh Maleya Oisiyos, that the very substance of this, we're going to use our soul, the essence of our soul, that there is letters, there's potential letters. We discussed when we were talking about the source of speech, how letters are in the soul itself. But where you're going to go, you're going to do a scan in your soul. You're going to see floating Aleph Beis over there. No, over there it's totally one with the soul. So what do we see over here? That the root of the Kalim, which is rooted in the Koach HaGvul, in the power of Gvul that's in the Or Ein Sof, is also one with the Or Ein Sof. So now he's going to do a little laparoscopic surgery over here to explain, is there a difference between how the oiros, the lights, the esespheres agnuzas, which according to the Arizal is the lights, how the lights are one with the Or Ein Sof, and how are these osios, how these letters, which are the shorish of the kalim, how they are one with the Or Ein Sof. And the main point he's going to explain is that the lights are more one with the Or Ein Sof than the vessels are one with the Or Ein Sof, even in their quintessential beginning. Why? And we'll explain that in a moment. We're going to get to that. But this is the Nakuda. This is the point of today's class. That the lights have a deeper, and that's why we say like this, the tzitzis, the fringes, they represent the Oyer HaMamale, the light of them, not the vessels. The tzitzis are not the vessels. The tzitzis are the beams, the laser beams of light that are coming out of the garment, which the garment is just a blanket of light. And these are the beams of light. There's no vessels here yet. But these laser beam lights are considered very much attached to the garment itself, and they're more attached than the vessels that these lights will enter. Now, the general idea that light is more one with the source than the vessels is a very pretty simple idea, but it's emphasized strongly. In other words, we are now applying the concept to the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, but he's going to borrow and he's going to compare it to a later stage in which it's easier to talk than before the Tzimtzum. Because the Tzimtzum, if you would go into the Or Ein Sof, you would neither see the lights of the Esespheres, we wouldn't see the vessels, and we wouldn't see the lights, because even the Esespheres are so tucked away that they're not, meaning they're so non-existent in the Or Ein Sof that they're not even noticeable. Nothing is noticeable there, only Or Ein Sof. However, therefore, it's easier to detect and to explain and to differentiate when you go to a more expressed state, a more revealed state, and over there we can see the difference, and then we can apply the same concept higher. So, in general, regarding the world of Atzilus, the world of Atzilus is already the place where you have spheroids, or attributes, and the attributes are made up of lights and vessels, oiros and kalim. And we know that in Atzilus, it's a world that's totally one with God. Atzilus is not really a world. It's not a creation. It's one with God. And it is emphasized that when we say it's one with God, what do we say? That the light, that Iyu v'chayihu chad, that Hashem is one with the lights, Iyu v'garmu chad, and God is one with the vessels. He's one with the lights, and he's one with the vessels. That's a statement of the Zohar. So the question is, why does the Zohar differentiate and say, he's one with the lights and one with the vessels, and say, and saying in two statements, he's one with his life forces, that the Orein Sof that's above, let's understand what this means. The Orein Sof that's above the light that goes into the vessels. What we might say is the soul of Kalam and the encompassing light. He is one with the Mamala Kalam light, with the light that goes into the vessels. That means he is one with Chiyuhu, with his emanating or vivifying energies that come forth to him to enliven the world, to enliven the vessels. And he's also one with the garments, which are the Garmu, which are the vessels themselves. So the question is, if he's one with everything, it should say, implying oneness to everything. The reason the Zohar splits it into two is because there's a very big difference. The level of oneness that he is one with the lights is a much deeper and essential oneness than his oneness with the vessels. Of course, he's one with the vessels as well. But his oneness with those vessels is not to the same degree of one like the oneness with the lights. Why? Because his oneness with the vessels, it's like he's attaching himself to something. He's like enclothing himself or attaching himself to something. And that's called like taking two separate things and making them one. It's like welding. You take two pieces of metal and you weld it in the fire and you turn it into a one. It's not through glue, it's through a welding process. It's becoming totally welded together, inseparable, but it's like two things attaching. He and his lights are in a state of dveikos, which is like one thing is emanating from the other, like light emanating from the source. It's not two, it's initially one. So just like it is in Atzilus, that the lights are unified with the source of the light, which is the Orein Sof, that surrounds Atzilus, much more to a much deeper degree than the Orein Sof that surrounds Atzilus is unified with the vessels, although he's unified with that as well, because here it's more in a state of iskashrus versus dveikus. The same is also in the Orein Sof, in the source of the vessels, and in the source of the light, in the Orein Sof, there is a difference. That his oneness with the lights is much stronger than the oneness with the vessels. Let's read it inside and then try to get an explanation. V'hainu, and this is, because he said, I'm going back to the parentheses on page Mem Gimel. I'm going to read a line before the parentheses. He says they're tied to the garment. Then min kanaf. V'hainu. What does that mean? It's not like the root of the vessels, haklulim ba'orein soif, which are also included in the orein soif. The ime yoshazeu gamkin ein soif mamish. Over there, the root of the vessels are also pure Ein Sof. They still are letters. Again, we're going to explain in a moment. The lights, the source of the lights, so here you have a unification of light with of energy with a word, with an ois, with a letter. So it's something other. A letter is not the light. The letter is an entity in which the light is going into. Obviously, these letters are so subtle that you don't even see the letters, but still, it's a letter. But when we're talking about the spheres hagnuzas, the 10 hidden, which are the root of the lights, the later lights, the Urpanimi, which they are an emanation of a higher light. It's the light. It's one light producing another light. It's like you have light, and then and then the light has an offshoot. There's a ray, and there's a ray of a ray. There's no anything other than it's an offshoot of that ray. They're both just light. The Yeshleimer, and he compares it. Just like in Atzilus, when you have Or and Kalim. It says in the Tikkun Zohar, he is one with his life forces. He is one with his garments or with his vessels. It says 2 times chad. Why does it say 2 times one? It's explained in many places that you can't compare the unification with the vessels to the unification of the lights. The yichud hakelim oiros, because the unification of the vessels with the lights, who kamoi shnei dvarim hamisyachtem. It's like two things that join together that become unified. Aval yichud oiros b'matzah elyon, but the yichud, the unification of the lights with the emanator, who b'chinas yichud v'dveikus mamish, is in a state of unity and dveikus, in complete attachment. Atshaha oir hu me'ein hamor, because the light is similar to the mor. So just like it is in Atzilus, the same is also in their root and in their source and the Orein Sof before the Tzimtzum, the SS Sfirosh and Shirish Memalakalam, the 10 spheres over here. Again, spheres over here, we're talking about lights, no vessels. The 10 spheres of lights, which is the root of later becoming the lights of the spheres that will later manifest as the light of Chachma, the light of Bina. But here we're talking about these lights as being Esa spheres Agnuzos, Hareim Kshurim, they are tied, Umiyuchadim and unified. But Oira Seviv Kalaman and the light of the Seviv Kalaman, Farezem Ein Amar, they're similar to the luminary. Agam Shazehu Pchinas or Pnimi. Turn over the page. Even though this is an internal light, which makes it different than the Or Makif. As we spoke, it's a more like a laser beam light as opposed to a blanket light. It's similar to the mar. When you mean kanaf, this is the idea that it's similar to the kanaf. Very brief, because we're going over time already. I'm just going to say very brief. The difference is just short. Is as follows: the light, the light, even the esespheres agnuzos, even the light, its inyan is light, meaning the whole idea of it is to express God. It's an expression of God. That's what light is, God expressing himself. It's just here, he's expressing himself without not to somebody. And here he's expressing himself to somebody. But it's all about him. It's a revelation of him. The Kalim, the root of the Kalim, Oisios is not him. Oisios is the root of creation, the root of the audience, the root of the world, the root of Gevul, as it is in its most pristine state. So the root of creation, as it is in its most pristine, higher, to the point that it's completely a power in God to produce something that's not him. That's the whole idea of the Oisios. It's away from him. That's what Kalim is. It's away from him. Oir is expression of him. This is the somebody, the entity who's not him, who you're expressing yourself to. So obviously understand that the Oiros, those Kalim, even when they're in the Oirin Saif, it's about the Kali, it's about the Gevul, it's about the limitation, as opposed to the Oiros, which is about the Oirin Sof, investing himself into everything. And that's the fundamental difference between the two. Maybe we'll still catch up on it in the next class right at the beginning to give it a little sharper to it. Thank you.